Tonight, I will tell you a story about time, missed chances, and the courage to start again. If you have ever whispered to yourself, "It is too late for me," then this story is for you. But on this particular evening, in a small, dusty shop, everything seemed completely normal. Or so it appeared. The story begins in a city where it always seemed to be raining. At the end of a narrow cobblestone street, there was a shop with a faded wooden sign. It read, "Arthur's Clocks, Repairs and Restorations." Inside, the shop was a world of rhythm. The walls were covered with clocks. There were tall grandfather clocks, small wooden cuckoo clocks, and elegant golden watches. The air smelled of old oil, dust, and lemon polish. And there was always sound. Tick-tock, tick-tock, hundreds of metal hearts beating at the same time. Arthur was 65 years old. He was a quiet man with silver hair and thick glasses that always slid down his nose. He loved the clocks because they were predictable. They followed rules. Every morning at 8 o'clock, he unlocked the door. Every afternoon at 2 o'clock, he drank a cup of hot tea. His life was a perfect, steady loop, just like the gears he fixed. But there was one thing in the shop that did not tick. In the far corner of the room, hidden in the shadows, stood a large object covered by a heavy gray sheet. Dust had settled on the sheet like snow. Arthur never looked at it. He had not touched what was underneath for 40 years. Tonight, the rain tapped against a glass window with a restless energy. Tap, tap, tap. Arthur looked up from his workbench. He felt a strange shiver on the back of his neck. He adjusted his glasses and looked at the door. He did not know it yet, but the steady rhythm of his life was about to be broken. Arthur sat at his heavy wooden workbench, his face bathed in the warm yellow light of a small lamp. Through his magnifying glass, the world looked enormous. A tiny screw looked like a boulder. A thin spring looked like a snake. He held a delicate pair of tweezers in his right hand. His hand was steady. It was always steady. He was fixing a pocket watch from 1925. It had stopped ticking 3 years ago, and the owner wanted it to breathe again. Arthur carefully placed a golden gear into the heart of the machine. It fit perfectly. Click. Good, he whispered to the empty room. Everything has a place. He sat back and rubbed his tired eyes. The shop was completely silent, except for the rain outside and the rhythmic ticking of the other clocks on the wall. He reached for his cup of tea, but when he touched it, the ceramic was cold. He had forgotten to drink it again. Arthur sighed, a long, heavy sound that seemed to disappear into the dust. He looked down at his hands. They were wrinkled now, marked by time and hard work. But for a second, the image changed. In his mind, he did not see a watchmaker's hands. He saw the hands of a young pianist flying over black and white keys. He could almost feel the vibration of the music in his fingertips. A melody, sweet and sad, began to play in his head. He shook his head quickly to make the music stop. No, he thought, that part of my life is over. I am just a mechanic now. Machines are safer than music. He stood up to stretch his back. It was 5:55 p.m. The sky outside was dark gray, turning to black. It was time to close the shop, go upstairs, eat a simple dinner, and sleep. It was time for the routine to end for the day. He walked toward the front door to lock it, but just as his hand touched the lock, the bell above the door rang out sharply. Dingling. Arthur froze. He looked through the glass. A figure was standing there in the pouring rain, holding a large wet umbrella. It was very late for a customer. Usually, People came in the morning with their broken alarm clocks or wristwatches. Arthur felt a flash of annoyance. He wanted to rest. He wanted to be alone with his silence. He hesitated, his hand hovering over the lock. Then, with a sigh of resignation, he opened the door. The wind blew a spray of cold rain into the warm shop. The visitor stepped inside, shaking water onto the floor. Arthur adjusted his glasses. He assumed it was just a neighbor with a battery to change or a strap to fix. He prepared to give his usual polite refusal. "I am closing now. Please come back tomorrow." But then he saw what the visitor was holding. It was not a watch. It was something wrapped in velvet, something large and heavy. Arthur thought he knew what to expect from this rainy evening. He was wrong. The visitor lowered her wet umbrella. She was a young woman, perhaps 25 years old, with bright, intelligent eyes. She did not look at the clocks on the wall. She looked only at Mr. Arthur. "I was told you were the best," she said. Her voice was soft but urgent. "They said you can fix anything that has gears." Arthur wiped his hands on a rag. "I fix timepieces, miss. Clocks, watches, nothing else." The woman stepped forward and gently placed a heavy object on the glass counter. She pulled back the dark velvet cloth. Arthur gasped softly. It was not a clock. It was a mechanical music box, but it was unlike any he had ever seen. It was made of gold and silver, carved with intricate designs of birds and vines. It looked ancient and magical, but it also looked dead. The metal was dull, and the winding key was bent. "It hasn't played music for 50 years, the woman said. "It is broken inside. Please, can you make it sing again?" Arthur took a step back, as if the box were hot. His heart began to beat faster. A music box was a machine, yes, but it was also an instrument. To fix it, he would need to understand rhythm, melody, and soul. He would need to be the musician he had buried 40 years ago. "No," Arthur said firmly. He shook his head. "I cannot help you. Take it to a toy maker. Take it to a jeweler." "I cannot," she replied. "It is too complex. You're the only one with the skill. I am a clockmaker." Arthur's voice rose, echoing in the quiet shop. "I deal with seconds and minutes. I do not deal with music. I am too old for puzzles like this. My hands are too stiff." He lied. His hands were fine. It was his courage that was broken. He was afraid to try and fail. He was afraid to remember what he had lost. The woman looked at him with sadness. She did not argue. She simply didn't move the box. She turned toward the door. "Wait!" Arthur called out. "You forgot your box." The woman opened the door, and the sound of rain filled the room again. She looked back over her shoulder. "It is not mine to keep any more. It belongs to the person who can hear its song. Maybe that is you." The bell rang, dingling, and she was gone. Arthur was alone again. He stood in the center of his shop, surrounded by hundreds of ticking clocks. Tick-tock, tick-tock, but his eyes were glued to the silent gold box on the counter. He wanted to lock the door, turn off the lights, and forget it existed. He thought he could just ignore it until morning. He thought he still had control over his quiet, safe life. He was wrong. The box would not let him sleep. Upstairs, in his small bedroom, Arthur stared at the ceiling. The rain had stopped, but the silence was louder than the storm. He turned to the left. He turned to the right. Sleep was impossible. His mind was not in his bed. It was downstairs, on the glass counter. The image of the gold box burned in his memory. It was a puzzle, and Arthur had never left a puzzle unsolved. At 2 a.m., he threw his blanket aside. "Just one look," he whispered to himself. "I will just look at the gears, and then I will sleep." He walked down the dark wooden stairs. The shop was filled with silver moonlight. The clocks were ticking softly. Tick-tock, tick-tock, like a heartbeat. Arthur walked to the counter and picked up the heavy box. He carried it to his workbench and turned on the bright lamp. He put on his magnifying glass and picked up a small screwdriver. With trembling hands, he removed the bottom plate of the music box. What he saw inside made him hold his breath. It was not a simple machine. It was a labyrinth of tiny levers, springs, and metal cones. It was beautiful, but it was incredibly complicated. As he looked closer, he realized something terrifying. The mechanism was not built like a clock, where every second is the same distance apart. The gears were spaced unevenly. They were designed to mimic the feeling of a human playing a song, speeding up, slowing down, pausing for emotion. A clockmaker could not fix this. A clockmaker follows strict rules. To fix this, he needed to understand the rhythm of a heart, not a watch. Arthur touched a small, broken spring with his tool. Ping! A tiny, sad note echoed in the room. He pulled his hand back. He felt a wave of fear. If he started this, he would have to remember everything he had tried to forget. The passion, the failure, the music. "I can't," he thought. "It is too much." But then he looked at the broken spring again. It looked lonely. It looked like him. He sat there for a long time. The fear was still there, but something else was growing. A hunger to create something beautiful again. He picked up his tools. He did not look at the clock on the wall. He did not care about the time. He began to work. By the time the sun came up and painted the sky pink and gold, Arthur had made a choice. He was tired. His eyes were burning, but he was not stopping. Nothing in his life would be the same. For the next 3 days, the sign on the door said close. Inside the shop, a silent battle was happening. Arthur fought against the tiny screws and bent springs of the music box. But mostly he fought against himself. The first day was a disaster. Arthur's hands, usually so steady with clocks, began to shake. The parts of the music box were so small that they seemed to mock him. He dropped a tiny screw on the floor and spent an hour searching for it on his hands and knees. "I am a fool," he muttered, his back aching. "I am an old man chasing a ghost." He wanted to throw the box into the trash, but the memory of the woman's voice stopped him. It plays for those who listen. By the second day, the mechanical work was done. He had polished the gold and oiled the gears. He turned the key to test it. Crank, crank, crank. The cylinder spun. The metal teeth plucked the notes. Plink, plunk, plink. Arthur frowned. The machine was working, but the music was dead. It was technically correct, but it had no soul. The rhythm was stiff. To tune it perfectly, he needed to hear the real notes. He needed a reference. Slowly, Arthur turned his head toward the dark corner of the shop. He looked at the large shape under the gray sheet. He had not touched it since he was 25 years old. He walked over. His heart hammered in his chest. With sudden pull, he yanked the sheet away. Dust flew into the air, dancing in the light. Beneath the sheet stood a beautiful, dark with upright piano. It looked like a sleeping giant. Arthur sat on the bench. It creaked under his weight. He placed his hands on the keys. His fingers felt thick and clumsy. He tried to play a simple scale, do, re, mi. The sound was terrible. His fingers slipped. The rhythm was uneven. It did not sound like music. It sounded like noise. Arthur covered his face with his hands. The shame was hot and sharp. He remembered why he had quit 40 years ago, because he believed he wasn't good enough. And now he was worse. "It is gone," he whispered. "The magic is gone." He looked at the golden music box on his workbench. It was waiting for him. He realized that the machine could not be fixed unless the man was fixed first. He had to tune his own heart before he could tune the gears. He had fixed the metal, but he had not yet fixed the music in his soul. And he didn't know if he had enough time left to do it. The next evening, the rain finally stopped. The air outside was cool and fresh. When the bell rang, dingling, Arthur did not jump. He was waiting. The young woman entered the shop. She looked at the counter immediately. There, sitting on a piece of soft velvet, was the golden music box. It was shining and clean. "Is it?" she asked, her voice trembling with hope. "It is fixed," Arthur said softly. "The gears are moving. The springs are strong." She reached out to take it, but Arthur put his hand up gently. "Wait," he said. "There is a condition. This is not a normal music box. It does not play a solo. It is designed to play a duet." The woman looked confused. "A duet?" "Yes," Arthur explained. "The gears are timed to pause. They leave spaces of silence. If you just wind it up, the song sounds broken. It waits for a partner. It waits for a piano to fill the gaps." The woman looked around the room. Her eyes landed on the old piano in the corner. The dust sheet was on the floor. "You have a piano," she said, looking directly at Arthur. "You must play it. We must test the machine." Arthur took a step back. His throat felt dry. It was one thing to play alone in the dark. It was another thing to play in front of a stranger. "No," he stammered. "I am just a mechanic. My hands are too old. I make mistakes." "The machine does not care if your hands are old," the woman whispered. "It only cares if you're listening." Arthur looked at his wrinkled hands. He looked at the silent clocks on the wall. If I stop now, he thought, I will be a clockmaker forever. I will be safe, but I will be empty. If I play, I might fail. But if I play, I might be free. Slowly, heavily, he walked to the piano bench. He sat down. The wood felt familiar. He nodded to the woman. She turned the key of the music box. Crank, crank, crank. She let go. The tiny metal teeth began to pluck. Plink, plink, then silence. Arthur took a deep breath. He raised his hands. He pressed the keys. Bum. A deep, rich chord filled the room. The music box answered with a high, sweet melody. Arthur played the next notes. His fingers were not stiff anymore. They remembered the path. The piano and the machine spoke to each other, low and high, human and mechanical, past and present. For the first time in 40 years, the shop was not filled with the sound of time passing. It was filled with the sound of life returning. The last note hung in the air like a drop of golden water. Then it faded into silence. But this silence was different. It was not the heavy, dusty silence of the clock shop. It was a vibrating, electric silence. Arthur sat on the bench, his chest rising and falling. His hands were resting on his knees. They were still trembling, but not from fear. They were trembling from adrenaline. "I made a mistake in the third measure," Arthur whispered, "and my tempo was too slow at the end." The young woman smiled. Her eyes were shining with tears. "It was perfect," she said. "It was human." She walked over to the piano and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Mister Arthur, I have a confession. I did not come here just to fix a music box." Arthur looked up, confused. "What do you mean?" "My name is Sarah," she said. "I am the headmistress of the city music school, just 3 blocks away. We have 50 students, and we have a basement full of broken instruments. Violins with cracks, flutes with bent keys, and pianos that have lost their voice." She paused and looked him in the eye. "We have plenty of mechanics who can fix wood and metal," she continued. "But we don't have anyone who understands the heart of an instrument. I have been looking for a mentor, someone who can teach the students to respect their instruments, not just play them." Arthur blinked. "Me? But I am just an old clockmaker. I haven't played in 40 years. "You played today," Sarah said firmly, "and you brought this dead machine back to life. Will you help us? Will you come and make our school sing again?" Arthur looked around his shop. He saw the clocks ticking on the wall. Tick-tock, tick-tock. They measured time, but they did not feel it. Then he looked at the piano. He felt a door opening in his chest, a door he had locked a long time ago. He realized that getting older did not mean the story was over. It just meant a new chapter was starting. "I cannot promise I will be perfect," Arthur said, a small smile appearing on his face. "We don't need perfect," Sarah replied. "We just need you." Arthur stood up. He felt taller. The rain outside had stopped completely, and the clouds were breaking apart. Then he said, "I suppose I should start tomorrow. Let's listen to the story one more time, a little slower and a little simpler. Mister Arthur was an old clockmaker. He lived in a quiet shop filled with hundreds of clocks. His life was very simple. He opened the shop, he fixed watches, and he drank tea. He liked this routine because it was safe. But Arthur had a secret. 40 years ago, he was a pianist. He stopped playing music because he was afraid of failing. He covered his piano with a heavy sheet and tried to forget it. One rainy evening, everything changed. A young woman named Sarah came into the shop. She did not bring a broken watch. She brought a beautiful golden music box. It was very old and it did not work. Arthur wanted to say no. He told Sarah that he was just a mechanic. He said he was too old to fix something so complicated. But Sarah left the box on his counter. She said, "It only plays for those who listen." Arthur could not sleep. He felt curious. Late at night, he opened the music box. He saw that the gears were like a musical instrument. To fix them, he had to understand rhythm and melody again. He worked for 3 days. He fixed the metal parts, but the sound was not perfect. Arthur realized he needed help. He took the sheet off his old piano. He tried to play the notes to tune the box. His hands were stiff, and he made mistakes, but he did not stop. When Sarah returned, she told him the secret. The music box was a duet. It needed a partner. Arthur sat at his piano and played along with the machine. Together, they made beautiful music. Arthur felt happy for the first time in many years. Sarah was surprised and happy. She told Arthur that she was a teacher. She offered him a new job, not as a clockmaker, but as a mentor for music students. Arthur smiled. He realized that even at 65 years old, it is never too late to find your dream again. My name is Arthur, and for a long time I was hiding. I lived in a world of clocks. I loved them because they were safe. A clock never surprises you. A clock never makes a mistake if you fix it correctly. I looked at my wall of ticking machines, and I felt calm. I thought I was happy with my silence, but I was lying to myself. Underneath a gray sheet in the corner, I hid my true heart. I covered my piano because I was afraid. I thought, I am 65 years old. My time has passed. I am not a musician anymore. I am just a mechanic. When the young woman brought that broken music box, I felt angry. I did not want to look at it. It was too beautiful. It reminded me of everything I had lost. I wanted to tell her to leave. I wanted to lock the door. But that night, I could not sleep. The silence in my room was too loud. I went downstairs and opened the box. When I saw the gears inside, I felt a spark. It was a small feeling, but it was warm. I realized that the machine was lonely, just like me. Fixing it was the hardest thing I have ever done. My hands shook. My eyes hurt. But when I sat at the piano to play the duet, something wonderful happened. The fear disappeared. As soon as I heard the music, I felt young again. I felt free. I learned a very important lesson that day. I learned that you cannot run away from who you are. And most importantly, I learned that it is never too late to start again. And so, the dusty clock shop became a place of music. The clock still ticked, tick-tock, tick-tock, but they were no longer the only sound in the room. We often think that our lives are like clocks. We think that time only moves forward, and once a moment is gone, it is gone forever. We tell ourselves, I miss my chance, or I am too old to learn that now. We hide our dreams under heavy sheets, just like Arthur hid his piano. But Arthur's story reminds us of a gentle truth. The heart is not a machine. It does not have an expiration date. Arthur waited 40 years to play again. He thought those 40 years were wasted, but they were not. They were just a long rest before the music started again. The only time that is truly wasted is the time we spend regretting the past. Perhaps you have a dream that you have locked away. Maybe you stopped drawing or dancing or speaking a new language because you were afraid of being imperfect. Tonight, I want you to remember the music box. It was broken, silent, and covered in dust. But all it needed was one person with the courage to turn the key. It is never too late to fix what is broken. It is never too late to make a new sound. Thank you for listening to this story. If this story touched your heart, or if it helped you practice your English, please click the like button. It helps more people find these quiet stories. And I have a question for you. Is there a hobby or a dream that you stopped doing, but wish you could start again? Let me know in the comments below. I would love to read your story. Subscribe for more stories. And until next time, sweet dreams.